Hello and welcome to ADTV, and today you join us at the Barford complex, and we've chosen to fish on the Match Lake, and we're actually sitting currently on peg 6. And the reason we're here today is to talk you through fishing the pellet feeder. Let's start with the basics of when or where I would fish the pellet feeder. Now for me, there is two situations that I would fish it. So the first one would be the time of year we're coming into now. As it gets colder, I think the pellet feeder produces a much neater pile of bait at the bottom. And let's say if we compared it to a method feeder, which was quite aggressive, casting it into the same spot. So that is one for me when it gets a bit colder. And secondly would be if the lake is very, very deep. Now, here on the Match Lake in front of us in the middle, you're probably looking at sort of anywhere between 12, 14, 15 foot in the middle. So it's really deep. If I was to put a method feeder in there, most of that bait is not going to get in that neat pile to the bottom. So the frame around the pellet feeder just allows you to get a smaller, neater parcel down to the bottom if it's deeper. So all year round in deep water, or if it gets colder, it's when it really comes into its own. So the rig itself, it doesn't need much explaining whatsoever. It's so simple. I've just got an inline pellet feeder running onto my line, attached to a quick change bead, and then a very, very short hook link. 2, 3, 4 inch hook link. Make sure they pick your hook bait up, and then you get that absolutely brilliant rod ripped off the rest as it hooks themselves. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, bait wise, as the name suggests, predominantly what you're probably going to be fishing with this is pellets. But this is another reason why I like the pellet feeder, because it lets me use bigger pellets. I think this time of year, it's all about trying to think how you want those fish to feed. And I don't really want them digging in the silt for sort of 2 mils or micro pellets that I perhaps would in the summer and you're trying to get loads of bait together. I'd rather them come in a few sort of bigger particles they can just graze over the top, and hopefully my hook bait's going to be in the middle. So pellet wise, I just soak them for, if they're 4 mils, soak for 4 minutes, 6 mils, soak for 6 minutes. They should be absolutely fine just to nip into the feeder. But having said that, don't neglect ground bait as well, especially if it gets really hard. It then means you're not feeding particles. If you feel that the fish really don't want to be eating bigger baits, ground bait or an expander mix is really good. I've had some brilliant results on the Hinders Tutti Frutti expander mix. It's high in flavour, there's loads of attraction, but not a lot there to eat. So when they come into it, it's only really my hook bait that they can pick up. Which then brings us on perfectly to hook baits and liquid. Pellets for me are the number one, but I have a good selection. I have different colours, different flavours I can switch throughout the day. You'll find that different venues, different times, change your colour, change your flavour, and you could catch. And there's an extra enhancer if I want. The colder and colder it gets, this comes into play more. I'll either dip my hook bait in some liquid just before I cast it out, or I'll drizzle it over the top of the feeder once I've loaded it. And yes, that is going to disperse when it hits the water, but it's creating an absolutely brilliant sort of cloud and smell in your zone, in the area where you're fishing. And then I guess lastly, the thing that I want to touch on is, this took me a long while to learn personally, fishing the feeder or the pellet feeder throughout the years, is I'd have 2 rods if I was fishing this properly all day, and I'd have one rod that was clipped up to the best looking fish holding spot in my peg. For instance, today we've got an aerator, so that for me is the number one spot that I'm going to concentrate on. And if it's a good day, hopefully you'll clip up there 5 or 10 minutes every cast and you'll catch it all day, and those are the red letter days. But it doesn't always work like that, and I've caught more fish recently on having a roving rod, a separate rod that I don't clip up, and that would be just casting it around my peg to try and find fish. As it gets colder, they definitely group up into sort of smaller balls, and I find I'd cast in, I'd get a bite, and for me it was like, oh brilliant, I found them. So I'd cast there again and I wouldn't get a bite, and it used to drive me absolutely crazy. But over the years, what I've done is I've sort of, in my head, what's happening is you're catching a fish from that area and they're not spooking down the other side of the lake, but they're wary and they just drift off perhaps a foot, 2 foot just to the other side, past it, right, left, wherever that may be, but they just drift off the area where you caught. So what I do is, in my roving rod, is I'll literally cast, catch a fish, and I'll move it 2 or 3 foot, hopefully catch another one, move it and catch another one. And throughout the day, you just catch loads of one fish. You're not in the same area, but you're just keeping fish coming. So those would be sort of my go-to tips, and how I've learned over the years that the pellet feeder works best for me. hopefully we're now going to put that into practice. We've got the cast out there sitting by that area, so I'm going to concentrate on that for a bit and see if we can get some fish together with the camera. Well, what a way to end the day's fishing on the pellet feeder. A wicked looking carp. He's got some character, some brilliant autumn colours. The orange is in him. He's a real special looking one, that. But it's been a real good day's fishing. The weather has been horrific. It's drizzled rain all day, but the fishing has been far from it. We've started off near the aerator and caught early doors, and then we've had to get the roving rod out and cast about to keep bites coming. So if you're not out on the pellet feeder already, get yourself out there using it, because it's going to get better and better as this weather cools down.